Thank you all for coming tonight. Help me welcome Michael Fiehler, a volunteer from the Missouri Department of Conservation's Nature Center here in town, and he's going to tell us about reappearing species such as elk, mountain lion, bears.
That's right, thank you. Welcome to the program here this evening. I see one of our other Nature Center volunteers, Phil Johnson, is here tonight. So, first I wanted to mention the Nature Center here in Cape. If you're not familiar with it, it's located on the highway as you're coming in from the interstate. And I have some information on the little counter over there, one of our newsletters, and a way to sign up for that and hear about all our programs and so forth out there. So if you're not familiar with the Nature Center, it's a pretty interesting place to visit, and a lot of neat programs go on there and so forth. So tonight, as stated, we're going to talk about some new animals here in Missouri. Specifically, we're going to kind of focus on the elk reintroduction and the black bears that are appearing, and what's the story on mountain lions. We get a lot of questions at the Nature Center about those three species, and also about armadillos. So we'll save that for the end, so we can even talk about armadillos before we're done tonight. So first, we'll talk about this animal that the hide is down here. This is a hide from an elk. The elk were very common animals all across North America at the time the settlers arrived. And about the time of the Civil War here, they pretty much disappeared from Missouri, pushed further west, and most folks think about their range of being in the western states, the Rocky Mountains and so forth. But a number of years ago, some states in eastern United States started reintroducing elk where they had once lived. For example, Kentucky has a very thriving elk population, elk herd in eastern Kentucky. Arkansas down here has a few elk, Michigan. So the biologists and wildlife managers have found that they can reintroduce some elk into areas where they had once lived. And back in the 1990s, there was a lot of interest here in Missouri from the public about possibly getting elk reintroduced. So the Department of Conservation did a feasibility study in the late 1990s, and they identified an area, a zone called the reintroduction zone, where they thought the elk could live and not be bothered too much about interference from man. It's about 324 square miles. Let me just pass these around, and you're welcome to take one of those. But on that map, it shows that reintroduction zone. It's out around the Peck Ranch area, sort of between Van Buren and Winona, and Ellington and Eminence. But as they were about 2001, there were some concerns about bringing elk back, mainly some health-related issues. There was a disease called chronic wasting disease, which affects deer and elk. It affects our nervous system. It's a fatal disease when it happens. It's not transmitted to humans or anything. But the agriculture community had concerns about possibly bringing in elk that might have this disease. So the department sort of put those plans on the back burner. Then a number of years went by. They continued to do some habitat improvement in this elk reintroduction zone. And in the meantime, a test was developed to allow veterinarians to test animals to determine if they had chronic wasting disease. So, once that test was available, they felt they could get some elk from another state, have them tested in a quarantine environment before they brought them back to Missouri so that they'd be healthy. And they worked out a deal with the state of Kentucky, who had this growing elk population, to bring some elk to Missouri. They wanted to bring in about 150 elk over a 3-year period of time, which they started doing. and they took them out to the Peck Ranch facility that the Department of Conservation has. They brought them in off the trucks. They kept them in a confined area for a period of time, and they termed this a soft release, just to bring them in and let them out of the trucks, but keep them in a confined area to allow them to recover from the stress of the trip, get used to their new environment and so forth. And they could put GPS radio collars on them while they had them confined and all that. And then after a while, they just kind of gradually opened a gate at the far end and let them wander out as they found the gate. So they did that. So over a 3-year period of time, they brought in 150 elk into Missouri. I guess last year was the last year that they brought any in. So they have a growing population, and they will maintain that population. They think they can have between 400 and 500 in that zone. So once they have a population in that zone, they'll probably have a limited hunting season to control the growth of them. Elk will not be like deer in Missouri, where they're all over the state. They want to have a healthy population, but confined it basically to that zone where they released them. There's a number of reasons for that. There's in that zone, I think about 80% of the land is under government control or trusteeship. So there's very little private property, no real farms or agriculture. There's some pasture ground, stuff like that. But they've gotten, I think, good support from the landowners in that area. So looks like the elk reintroduction is well on its way to being a successful program here in Missouri. The flyer I passed out has a map. We actually have an 11-mile driving tour back in through Peck Ranch. I haven't been out there yet. If you go out there, you might want to call in advance to see, make sure the roads are all open. These are rugged gravel roads back in through that property. The elk are not like elk or deer in that they tolerate humans. They're much more reclusive. So you're more likely to see them early or late in the daytime. One popular time I might suggest might be going out in the fall of the year, like probably in October. That's the time of the year when the elk are rutting. And their habitat is that a bull elk, or the male, will have a group of females that they breed with. So bull elk have a very loud call. It's called a bugle. And they do this bugle at that time of the year predominantly. And you can hear it a mile or more away. So it's something that can be heard about any time of the day, 24 hours a day. The elk are bugling, but they do that to attract cows to them. So the elk hide here, this is pretty much the color of the elk. They're a light tan. The mane is have darker hair on the mane. The rump is a lighter color, almost butterscotch. The males or the bulls have the large sets of antlers that they grow, and they shed those every winter, and then in the spring they start growing a whole new set. So that's quite a bit of bone mass that these animals shed and regrow every year. So they're just like deer. They are the largest member of the deer family, so have some similarities to the white-tailed deer. Their elk are grazers. White-tailed deer that we're familiar with are browsers, so there's some difference in the types of plants and so forth that they do feed on. So hopefully the elk reintroduction will be as successful as some of the things like the wild turkey and other programs that have been done here in Missouri. So Anyone have any questions about that elk reintroduction? Yes?
Is the color of the female different than the male?
Not much, they're pretty much
So
identical in
if you
color.
see one at the distance, you won't, other than the antlers, you won't know.
The bulls are often going to be bigger. An adult bull can weigh up to 800 pounds. And an adult cow is probably in the range of 300 to 500 pounds. Roughly. So an elk at the shoulder is going to stand about so tall. So they're a lot bigger than the deer that we used to see. So the elk reintroduction was a planned thing. There was a lot of support from the public. Sportsmen's groups like the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation did some of the funding and has supported that. So, of course, the agricultural community in Missouri, they had to be sold on the idea too. And the Department of Conservation, as part of their management plans, they do have radio GPS collars on them, so they're learning a lot about how they're using the habitat out there, where, what types of areas that they're spending the days in, the nights in, how they're moving around over the course of the year. And they do have plans to take care of any or address the issue of some wander off this area. So in fact, that had happened once about a year ago. One of the cows, for some reason, was wandering south. It was not too far down to Arkansas, and she was headed toward Arkansas. And the biologists involved in this program were in touch with the game officials in Arkansas. So we don't want your elk to come into Arkansas. What are you going to do about it? Well, we're just going to keep monitoring her. And she kept getting closer and closer, so finally they had to get her. They shot her and keep her from wandering off and creating issues down there where they didn't want her. But so Arkansas has some elk, but they're down in the west central part of the state, not up in northern Arkansas. Yes?
How far can elk range? How far can they wander?
How far can they wander? Oh, elk have a pretty large range. They can wander a long ways. Out west, they tend to spend their summers up in higher elevations. When the weather gets bad in the wintertime, they'll migrate to lower elevations where better climate. And some of these herds, I mean, they'll migrate 50 miles or further, won't they, Phil?
Yeah,
So,
certain areas.
so there could be some seasonal movement within a day. It depends on the habitat, the amount of food that they want to eat, the cover, the security they have, things like that. So, but I know in areas out west, it's not uncommon for them to travel a number of miles between a feeding area and a bedding area in the day's time. So.
Do they tag the young ones when they're born, or do they
They,
untag?
they've been tagging them and taking DNA samples and doing some blood tests and things like that and so forth. So some of those that were born while they were in that confinement, it was easy to do that on, and I think several were born while they were being transported over. And some of the cows they knew were pregnant when they were coming, so I think they kept those in an area where they could, have access to the calves.
Do they normally have one calf a year?
I think generally one. Mm-hmm. Whereas white-tailed deer, the first year a doe may just have one, but after that, two's the norm for deer. So the deer population can grow pretty fast that way.
Do the collars provide or present a problem for them surviving? Seemed to me like they would be caught on limbs and.
No, I haven't heard of any problems. Phil, do you know if the batteries go dead after a while.
After a
And
while.
I think they have a way of triggering a release or something on those.
I've never heard anything much about them getting hooked up or
Yeah.
anything, because elk tend to move into more open country
Yeah.
and all. They're generally not as, as heavy a cover as a lot of the deer are down in the Ozarks.
Okay, that's the elk situation. Let's talk about another animal. This one right here, black bear. Anybody in the audience ever seen a black bear here in Missouri? Ever seen one like the Smoky Mountains or out west, or, yeah? We've been having an increasing population of black bears in Missouri. People ask, why is that? Well, our dear friends down in Arkansas, back in the 60s, well, actually, I think it started in 1959, they had an area where they wanted to introduce black bears. So, like 1959 until, I think, 67, the state of Arkansas brought in about 250 or 60 black bears that they got from Minnesota and Canada and released them down in the Ozark, Ouachita Mountain area in Arkansas. And I think they picked out a pretty good spot because those bears did pretty good. And their population's been expanding, coming to Missouri. So I think a good way to understand what's going on with the black bear population expanding is talk about an annual or a 2-year cycle in the life of black bears. So if we start this time of the year, this is about the time of the year the females or the sows are getting ready to breed. So they breed. They have a system that called delayed implantation. So basically the fertilized embryo is not implanted till later in the fall. So the adult bears go through the summer and the fall. Basically all they have to do is feed, get fat. So their diet's about 90% plant material. So they're feeding on tender grasses and things like that are coming out in the spring. As berries and soft mass type things are ripe, they'll feed on that. Later in the fall, the acorn crop is a big source of nutrition for the black bears, so they feed on acorns. A little bit of animal material. They're, of course, as they're wandering around the woods, if they come, they're turning over logs and rocks, and they'll find ants and other insects and grubs and things. They'll feed on those. If they happen to come across a newborn fawn deer, they might feed on that. They're not going to be out chasing down animals to catch them to feed on. That's not their nature. But they can feed on a small animal if they catch it. The size of bears, females, probably about 100 to 300 pounds, and males can range about 200 to 600 pounds. So,
Yeah, I was on the phone talking to one of the guys down in Arkansas, and they had captured a 650-pound bear. And I was checking some of the records today, and somewhere in Wisconsin, Stony Point, someplace, they have the record of one of the biggest ones ever caught, ever killed, was 802.5.
yeah, the department has trapped some here in Missouri, some males that were almost 500 pounds. So anyway, all summer long, the fall, the adult bears are kind of feeding, getting ready for the winter time. People think about bears hibernating in the winter, but in this part of the country, they do a process called denning. So late in the fall, they pick out like a den, a place where they're going to crawl into for the winter time. Their metabolism slows way down. This place that they crawl into might be under some logs and rocks, a shelter place, might be in a little, they might dig out a little spot to be protected. So they don't have to have a cave or something to go back into. They can kind of make a spot for some shelter. They have found that here in Missouri, the females go to a den about Thanksgiving time. It's about 2 to 3 weeks later, toward the middle of December, when the males go to a den. And while they're in that den in the wintertime, when the fertilization process and that is completed in the females, and they give birth. And usually they give birth to 2 little ones. So they're born in the den. Mom's like in a deep sleep. They nurse on her. And it comes springtime, up March or so, things are warming up, they start coming out of their den. And the little ones have grown up, they're able to get around on their own. So the young ones then will spend that whole year with their mother, and they'll den with her that fall. The females only breed every other year. So the young stay with her for 2 years. And the following spring, they come out of the den, and the female will be getting ready to breed again, so she drives off the young. The young females usually wander off in short ways and kind of establish their territory. These young males that are about 2 years old, they're driven quite a ways away. Other bears don't want these young males around their territory. So that's how the population of black bears can spread. You get these young males are being driven out, so they wander off. Sooner or later, females catch up with them. So we've had, as the Arkansas population has done well and prospered and expanded, they've started coming up into southern Missouri, where the habitat is very good for them and very similar down in Arkansas. Yes?
What's the possibility of just stumbling upon a den mama bear if you're just out hiking?
In the wintertime? Well, the possibility around here is probably pretty low, but if you go in some other parts of Missouri,
I mean, how well hidden are they?
well, I have some photographs up here that I'll show you afterwards,
Oh.
so you can kind of see the spots.
Oh.
So, now,
I have a question.
yes.
So is it like 3 months that they're in that den before they?
Well, from say the end of November till March, November, December, January, February, so.
No food or anything?
So, right, so that's why all summer and fall, they're just feeding and trying to put on weight. They have to have stores of fat to last them over that period of time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they do gain quite a bit of weight. Some figures I was looking at today, one bear had been at 340 and he was 450 by the time he went into hibernation.
Mhm.
That's cool.
So here a few years ago, in 2010, I think the department started a study. They wanted to get a better handle on the population here in Missouri, and so forth. So this study is just still, the end of it's still going on. But the first year over in southwest Missouri, they wanted to trap 25 bears, put radio collars on them and take some measurements and DNA samples and so forth. The following year, they were going to use some hair snares in that area to track their movement. And then they had 2 years after that, they had another trapping area more towards southeast Missouri. So that first year, I mean, they caught 25 right off the bat. They catch them in a barrel trap, so they're trapped live. They go in and in essence, put them to sleep, get them out, weigh them, take measurements, DNA samples, blood samples, things like that. Put a radio collar on them. They collared, I think, 14 or 15. Several of them were pretty small. They didn't think the collar would stay on. Several were retrapped ones, so they had already caught that one. So now that they had these radio transmitters, GPS transmitters on these bears, they can track them. and they're getting a lot of information about where they move in Missouri, when they go to a den, where that den is. So in the wintertime, the biologist can go to that den site, and they can crawl right in there, pull the young out after they're born, weigh them, measure, and so forth. And I've got some photos of that too. So we have been having black bears. We have a breeding population of black bears in Missouri. The department is doing a lot to try and get a good idea of the habitat they prefer, where they're at, and that sort of thing, so they can better manage them. And I think when they get up to, they're probably close to 400 in Missouri. And I've heard them say that if we have about 500 in the population, it's probably the time we'll institute some type of hunting season in that area to kind of control the population somewhat. So, there's a question. Did you have your hand up here? Or?
No, but I was just curious, do they have the smell of the humans when they go in there and take those babies? They can't detect the smell that they still.
There's like the bears have, of course, poor hearing and fairly poor eyesight, but they do have a very keen sense of smell.
Very strong smell.
Hmm.
They have one of the best smells of any animal.
But that doesn't seem to bother them. I mean, they're asleep.
I was going to say, before I worked at the Nature Center, I got a call. I was talking to people in Arkansas about bear season. Cut to the chase of the story. I got invited down to participate with some educators. This was down, I think, in the Ouachitas. I went down to this area. There were about, must have been 30 or 40 of us, and a team of biologists and a guy with radio telemetry and everything took us out, and we went into a really interesting area with big cliffs, big high woods, everything. And we tracked down, went to an area, and there was a cave there. And we crawled back in the cave, and there was a female and 2 yearling cubs. And we pulled them out. The female was about 180 pounds. We weighed them all. The 2 yearling cubs, now here again, here's your cub that's in his second winter. So that, following in that spring, he's going to get out of there. But one of them was 87 pounds and the other was 93. We took a number of pictures, and I had one of the bears laying in my lap. As the guy took a picture, I thought there will never be another one like this. And I never will forget, the guy told me, he said, now look, don't let it swallow its tongue. So open its mouth and pull the tongue out. So I opened up the bear's mouth and I reached in and pulled the tongue out. And I'll never forget that. It's just so soft and everything, but I mean, I guess there's a reason for that, but it's just weird. It was just, I remember, I'm so glad I went down there, I'm an ex-biology teacher, so it was a great experience for me to see that. And they called her Snowball. They had encountered her before. They had a record. Her last recorded contact was 60 miles away.
I want to pass something around that I pulled off our website today. This side, map of Missouri with little colored dots, different years. These are places in Missouri where there confirmed black bear sightings. You can kind of see at a glance, sort of from Springfield up towards St. Louis, south of I-44. And on the other side, there's reports by bear, by county. This bottom one's counties with reports of cubs. So just some interesting numbers. And our website does have a lot of information on there. As Phil mentioned, back years ago, they used to have to do radio telemetry to triangulate to find these animals that they had collars on. Now with this GPS stuff, I mean, the researchers can sit in Columbia and pull up on a computer and find out where that bear is. On the department's website, if you're interested, you can go in and bring up some information about this bear study, and they'll show maps with little pinpoint where the bear number such and such was on a certain day. So you can track the movements and see where these bears are moving around in the state. We've all heard people talk about feeding bears, and bears can become very quickly become used to getting food from humans, and that's something that is highly discouraged. Things like leaving pet food out overnight, bird feeders, trash, garbage, things like that, out in these rural areas where there are bear sightings. It can really habituate a bear to coming in for an easy meal very quickly.
I wouldn't guess that.
Yeah, in Vail or in Aspen, in those places, a lot of people can't even, they have to bring their bird feeders in at night. And they can't even have regular mailboxes. They have to have their mailboxes constructed so they're sealed shut in such a way. I don't know, they have to open them differently. I was talking to a guy in Vail just the other day.
So while they want to have a good, healthy, wild population of bears in Missouri, you have to kind of minimize that human contact where food is associated with humans, because it can really create some problems. And since they're still pretty new in Missouri, and people over in southwest Missouri are a little more accustomed to them, but if you're out camping, you have to take special precautions with food and things like that. If you have a cabin out, things like that, you have to be really careful of. The department always wants to find out, when people see black bears and where they are. And I brought along some copies of this, and you're welcome to take one if you spend any time over that area. And basically, you can fill out the bottom of where you sighted one at. And this is a pre-addressed thing. Drop it in the mail. It goes to the Department of Conservation. And back 15 years or so ago, even, these were very common over in southwest Missouri. They'd be laying on a counter in convenience stores and things like that. So they've been making them available to the public for a long time and get feedback on where there are bears. And also the department has a publication, you're welcome to take a copy, on how to minimize nuisance problems with black bears. So if you live in a rural area, maybe you have an orchard or big gardens, things like that, beehives, there are ways to protect bears from those things too. So. Someone was asking about the bear dens. I'll just pass this around to the other direction maybe. And here's some actual photos of some dens. And on the next page, some of the characteristics of the dens. A lot of this information is on our website too. We can pull it up and look at it. But it doesn't take too much to offer them some protection. I wouldn't be comfortable out there all winter under a down tree or something like that.
Or else we can't do it.
Okay, so the elk are here because we brought them. We wanted them here. The black bears are here just because they're expanding their range out of Arkansas. They need habitat. We've got good habitat. So they're going to fill it. Do it the old-fashioned way, Mother Nature's way. Now this next animal, we pass a few of these around. Mountain lion. Goes by a number of names. Mountain lion, cougar, panther, all the same animal. Here's a hide one right here. Have a long tail. For years and years, people in Missouri have talked about mountain lions being around. I can remember back many years ago, it was talked about in coffee shops, family gatherings, and hunting camps. You know, it's always a secondhand report. My uncle's cousin saw one crossing the road, or, you know, something like that. Well, so the department heard about all these reports, and they had no way of documenting any of this stuff. And then back in 1994, I was still working. I was out in the West Plains. I was a salesman, and I traveled around. I was out in the West Plains. I bought a copy of the newspaper that day. Opened up the newspaper. On the front page of the West Plains paper, there was a photograph of two fellas sitting on the tailgate of a truck with a mountain lion across their lap.
Alive?
Dead. Dead mountain lion. And, you know, they had put black over their face so you couldn't recognize them,
Oh, my.
and over the license plate on the truck. So, I thought, oh, this is interesting. This is going to be interesting now. So the department, I think, they finally had some evidence that there was a mountain lion around. So, of course, they went and got these fellas. They wanted to get a DNA sample and see the carcass, do some testing. Well, these guys said they had shot it while they were out coon hunting or something over around Peck Ranch. And word got out, and they got scared of having it, so they took it back out and dumped it beside the road. So they took the Department of Conservation folks out there, but they couldn't find the carcass. Lo and behold, something happened with this carcass. Well, they still got in trouble. They ended up getting fined like $2,000 a piece from the federal people on a technicality. They were in the national forest. It was under federal jurisdiction. This was protected animal and so forth. So they didn't have the carcass, but I think it got the ball rolling with the Department of Conservation that we might actually have some mountain lions in Missouri. So they started a program where they have mountain lion response teams. And there's several of these teams around the state, and they're composed of biologists and different department personnel. They sent these individuals to some states out west where they have mountain lions, and had them spend some time with the biologists and field people out there to show them what mountain lion tracks are like, how they're different from dog and coyote and so forth. You see this? Okay. They learn what a kill site is like. So a mountain lion kills an animal, just prey in a certain way, and so forth. So we have several of these mountain lion response teams around the state. So when they would get a call from somebody who says, hey, I saw a mountain lion out here in my yard or my pasture or across the road, these teams could respond to those reports. One of the tools they have that they take out, they have some life-size cutouts from plywood of a full-size mountain lion, a bobcat. Okay, and I've seen, I was at a program one time, I saw some photos of some of these pictures that people sent in. You know, it's always through a window, low light conditions, and so forth. A lot of things can look like a mountain lion to people. Okay? So once they would take those full life-size cutouts of a mountain lion and put it in the spot where a photograph may have been taken, for example, you can see the difference in the size. So, anyway, they started investigating these reports. To have what the department considers a confirmed sighting of a mountain lion, you need to have one of several things. You need to have a carcass, which is understandable. You need to have tracks that are identified by the response team. You have to have scat, or droppings, that they identify. You have to have hair, which can be tested. So, or a photograph where they can document the location. Okay? So those 5 things. So, since then, I read what less than 1% of the cases that they're called out on actually are confirmed mountain lion sightings. Some of the things that are confused with mountain lions, one's bobcats, and we have a growing population of bobcats in Missouri, but they're much smaller than the mountain lion. They're colored differently, and they don't have this long a tail. Mountain lion's tail, or a bobcat's tail is about so long, they're just a few inches long. Okay. House cats can be that same color, have a tail. Yellow labs, black labs, Great Danes, all sorts of dogs and cats have been confused, mistaken for a mountain lion. Some of the people tried to hypothesize where were these lions coming from? Well, the closest populations down in West Texas are some mountain lions, naturally, and then west of Colorado, the Dakotas, up in the Black Hills area, there are mountain lions there. And interestingly enough, some people have them for pets. They knew that at the time, about 20-some people in Missouri had permits. You have to have a special permit to have one in captivity. So 20-some people had them in Missouri, and probably in surrounding states also. You get one as a little bitty cub, it's a cute little thing. They grow up, and they're meat eaters, they're carnivores. You have to feed them meat all the time, which can become an expensive habit. So I'm sure some have been turned loose. Some may have gotten loose accidentally. They were giving out permits for people to have them in captivity, but they didn't have real good guidelines on the cages and the fences to contain them. So it's possible that some got loose. And they also think that if 20-some people had permits to have them, about that number may have had them without permits. So that's why they were wanting to get DNA samples of these carcasses and things like that, trying to get a handle on where they come from. And they eventually did get a couple carcasses that they tested. One was killed on the road up in the Kansas City area, near downtown Kansas City. One was killed on the roads through Fulton, Missouri. Now, if you look at a map where there have been confirmed sightings, there's an area in northern Missouri which sort of follows the Missouri River, and I don't think it's too much of a guess to say, well, these from out west, like in the Dakotas, you can follow that Missouri River corridor and come east, and these in southern Missouri, they could have come down there too, or come up to Texas.
And they had one that was killed in Sioux Falls. You go up I-29 from Kansas City going north.
Mm-hmm.
So they're experiencing coming across also from the west. In Omaha, there was one killed in Omaha. By the way, there was another one, I don't know if you remember, in Kansas City, a guy shot one out of a tree. They arrested him.
Out in the state of South Dakota has been doing a study for a number of years, and they've been putting some radio transmitters on them, and some of those have wandered 600 to 800 miles and shown up in Ohio and Michigan, places like that. So it's quite feasible. They have a growing, expanding population out there, and the people in South Dakota estimate that probably 20 to 25 mountain lion a year are leaving their area looking for new territories, new habitat.
The figure I read today on the Black Hills was they had estimated, I don't know, 300 or 400 in that area.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how the Black Hills, it's a good area, but it kind of surprised me. I didn't know how it got so populated, but that one cat that came out of there, they knew that by the radio collar on her, he, that's another thing. The cat had gone to Michigan. They knew it had gone to the upper peninsula of Michigan, come back down into the lower part of Michigan, went all the way on to Massachusetts, got hit and killed on the road, and they were able to track it back to where it had been. So that shows you how far ranging. And these are males.
Yeah, so since 1995, when they started this response team, I don't know if you can see this, but since 1995, there have been 5 confirmed mountain lion sightings in Missouri. That's through the end of last year, okay? In 2012, there were 12, and in 2013, 7. So 19 of that 45 in the last 2 years. And if you read, you know, how are they confirming all those? Of that 19, 18 of the 19 were from photographs. A lot of people in rural areas have these trail cameras or motion-activated cameras out on their property just to see what type of wildlife's moving around, or to use it for hunting purposes too. So I think the big spike in the numbers, if you look and see, almost all of them have been from photographs. But still, the response team goes out and they have to document, you know, look at the photograph and check the landmarks and make sure this is the exact spot where that photograph was taken. Because in Photoshop, you can do a lot of weird things now, so they don't trust anybody to come up with those types of things. The one that was not documented by photographs, you probably heard about on the news, out by Ellington, a guy trapped one, caught a live one in a trap. He said he was trapping coyotes, put the trap in the back of his truck, drove into town, called the conservation folks. They came, said, well, can't keep it, can't kill it, they're protected. So they put it to sleep, weighed it. They determined a young male, about 2 years old, you know, took some DNA testing and took it out to the national forest out there and released it and let it go. So, yes.
Yeah, there was one sighting where my folks live in Chesterfield,
Mm-hmm.
here in St. Louis here, and I didn't see it on this map. I
Well,
wondered
now this
why that was.
This brochure I passed out in the last page, that's not up to date.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Here is, I got this off the website today, so
Oh, okay.
you can look at that.
Oh, okay.
As I said, this is an ongoing thing where they're updating their numbers all the time, so they just didn't reprint that brochure. But the rest of the information in there about the mountain lions, I think is pretty good.
Might want to emphasize too that the males range very widely. The young males have to get out of the area. The dominant male will kill them.
Mhm.
There's a guy, and I'm trying to remember his name, in Idaho. I remember he had a movie where he had done a study. And they had a big area, big enclosure, and they had a young cat that a female had had young ones, and the young ones were kind of getting a little up, and they were getting ready. And one of them escaped, and they found it had been killed by a male not very far away. So the males have to move out, and I've got a list at home of some territorial areas, and the home ranges on some of the males out west are as high as 800 square miles. So, you know, that's a big area.
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to the black bears, where the young
Yeah,
males
young males
are
gonna have-
forced out,
Forced out.
and they're, you know, if they're looking for good habitat. And,
But cats really do move.
yes,
Whether it's a mountain lion or a bobcat, do they travel in groups or are they single?
I think they're more solitary, might have one or two together, but
Yeah.
more solitary.
About 3 years ago, I was deer hunting down in Cuba, and I was sitting on the edge of a dry creek bed, and all of a sudden I looked up and this bobcat was coming, just walking right at me. And he would stop and stare at me, and he'd come a little further, and I had a feeling he knew that I was there, because if he would stop and watch me, stop and watch me, pretty soon he ran up this side and left. My biggest fear for the rest of the day was were there any others?
Probably not.
Really, because my thought was, do they travel singly, or do they travel in groups or pairs?
If you saw several together, it would probably be a young female that still has some young ones with her.
They're scary.
Yeah.
A bobcat probably wouldn't bother you though.
I mentioned the diet, black bears, 90%
No,
plant,
probably wouldn't bother you in most cases.
the diet of the mountain lion, they're carnivores, it's 100% meat. And they estimate that an adult mountain lion feeds on about 1 deer a week. So they eat a lot of meat. They will attack, say, a deer. They'll sneak up on it, jump on its back, and they kill with their jaws by crushing the skull or the spine, the neck, with their jaws. They have a characteristic way then that they feed. They open the body cavity up and pull the stomach out, and then they'll feed on usually the heart and the lungs first. And they'll feed on that carcass for a number of days. They'll drag it off a ways and cover it up with leaves or debris to kind of hide it, come back to it and feed on it. Their tongue is very rough and coarse, and they can strip meat right off the bones. They do not eat hide or hair. So that's one way they can tell the droppings from a mountain lion different from, say, other animals.
They wouldn't have hair out.
Right. So, now, a lot of the stories we hear about mountain lions, people hear things at nighttime. And on our department's website, they have some sounds of a mountain lion. And give me just a minute here, I'm going to try and bring this up and play this. If I can here, hang on. Okay. So if this area and turn the volume up. Now it'll give some sounds from mountain lion, but then also a number of other animals that you might hear in the wild. You'll hear some similarities between them. So. Sorry. Anybody ever think they've heard that one? They also have some videos of mountain lions, but I think we're taking the zoo. It's not.
Well, I was walking out about 4:30 in the morning out to the deer camp where I was stationed. And I heard a scream early in the morning, but I had no idea what it was. It scared me, but I had no idea what it was.
Okay, there's another recording they have where they, for comparison, play sounds like a raccoon, different foxes, and some owls and things. And a lot of other sounds have some similarities to what the mountain lion sounds like.
And that was the mountain one.
That was mountain lion. And it's on the department's website, so you can go find it. I'm just having a hard time getting it up there. So, you know, the reports and comments we hear at the Nature Center and so forth, people, again, think they've heard things, they're not sure what it is. A lot of them pretty scary sounding.
Particularly that hour of the morning.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good.
Yeah, but that bird anywhere close to anything. Might have been a screech owl or something.
Mm-hmm.
They'll scare you.
Mm-hmm.
That was a mad cat.
Yeah, it sounds like a couple of tomcats mixing it up.
Yeah.
So, to summarize, the elk are here because we're bringing them. The black bear are just coming in on their own. The mountain lions are probably here sometimes. You know, there may not be any in the state at all today. There may be a bunch. The department doesn't think they have a breeding population of mountain lions yet, but I think it won't be very long. I've heard people say they've seen cubs, but those are, again, are not documented sightings, so.
Yeah, I called Columbia today. They didn't, they wouldn't confirm anything like
Yeah.
that, but you might point out to them too, the mountain lion does not occur in the melanistic phase. So
Right.
they're not black.
Right, I was gonna bring that up. A lot of people
You know,
talk about Black Panthers. You know, I grew up watching Tarzan movies, and about every other one, there was a Black Panther. So everybody thinks that's an animal. But in the scientific world, there is no such animal as a Black Panther.
there is a black
There is.
jaguar, melanistic jaguar.
Right.
Jaguars have moved back into Arizona.
Just-
Interestingly enough.
Yeah, there's a skin pigment melatonin, because it gives you the darker colors. Some cats, leopards have spots, right? And jaguars down in Central America and Mexico have spots. And it's possible you can have what the biologists call a melanistic color version, and they're real dark. Sort of the opposite of an albino, I think. You have to have the melon present before you can have an excess amount of it. But cougars or mountain lions don't have that. And there's not been a documented case of a melanistic color phase of a mountain lion. Knowing Hollywood and all these Tarzan movies, they probably had a cat that they dyed the hide on or something. It's like kind of look like that.
Well, it wouldn't be impossible. I mean, given this, how many people in this country have, well, whatever animals they've had and they've gotten loose or whatever.
Yeah.
You could have a leopard, a black leopard is a black panther
Yeah.
or whatever. It wouldn't be beyond possibility. I don't know, down south particularly, that might have happened.
So how did you learn all that information? Like, how many years, what's your background? I'm curious, all that knowledge you know, and it's kind of interesting, you know?
Well, my degree's in biology.
Okay.
I worked in the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, okay.
When I retired about 7 years ago, I started volunteering for the Department of Conservation at the Nature Center. But I've always been an avid outdoorsman, so, and as a volunteer at the Nature Center, they have some training for us and so forth, and we occasionally get to attend meetings with a lot of the Department of Conservation personnel that are pretty informative, and our website now, that has a lot of information on it. If you want to spend the time and poke around on it and learn a lot of this stuff.
That's interesting. Thank you.
You know a volunteer at the Nature Center, don't you?
Well, Pat does.
His wife's one of the volunteers.
She drags me out there every once in a while. Are you more likely to see a mountain lion in a tree or on the ground?
Of course, they do climb trees,
Yeah.
like to get away from dogs or something like that.
You see, when
You're more than likely to.
when I was deer hunting, my biggest fear was what was in the tree rather than what was on the ground.
Yeah, you're more likely to see one on the ground where it might be moving around probably. And they, some reading I was doing, they spend a lot of their time during the daytime, like cats, kind of laying around, taking a cat nap, stuff like that. If they've killed in the last week, they've probably got a carcass stashed someplace, so they'll go feed a while and go back. Yes, sir.
They never come together and hunt like 2 or 3 at a time? They're always individual?
Not like wolves do. Wolves are pack animals and they'll hunt together, but are you familiar with anything like that? I think they're more individual.
No, they're completely individualistic. They're very definitely, the males are very defensive about their home ranges and everything, so they're very solitary.
Well, how do
animal.
they find each other to mate? I mean, they've got such a.
There are ways they
wide
can leave scent
Scent.
around their territories and so
Females
forth.
leave scent trails.
Mhm.
They become a little bit, this is just my insight on it. I go to Colorado each year with a friend to hunt mule deer and stuff. And it's a little bit of an issue out west. The mountain lion have increased. My friend John and Kathy, Kathy was getting in her car one day, getting ready to drive down to Mesa and then gone to Grand Junction, but she was just driving down the gravel road. And she looked out and the mountain lion was falling right alongside the car. She just come out of the house. She was only about 80 feet from the house. And then at a later time, they heard the ruckus in the yard and they looked out their front window and their dog was killed in the yard by a mountain lion. I've been up on their ranch. I know where they're at. They're up about 7,000 feet and they're in mixed territory, which is good. It's a variety of skin. But I'm hearing more griping and groaning by some people saying that the mule deer are going down and they're trying to get the state of Colorado to. And the thing is, you can't go out and just hunt mountain lion like you go hunt squirrels or go hunt deer or whatever. You almost got to have dogs to track mountain lion. That means there's some people that do that. There's some ranchers that have that, but otherwise you got to go get an outfit or something. I paid $5,000 here 3 years ago to go on mountain lion hunt, and it was very interesting. But I'm sorry to say it was not successful.
Was the mountain lion killing the dog like for food or just to be honored?
Oh, it was killed, well, for whatever, yes, it's motivation, it's after food, whatever it can get.
All right.
It'll kill the dog.
Okay.
It'll kill the dog. And I think you have to say that, mountain lions on the whole, are generally not considered that. I worked in Glacier National Park for 3 summers. We were working more about grizzly bears than we were mountain lions. But, mountain lions, you can't rule out the possibility that a mountain lion could attack somebody because it's happened, out in Los Angeles. I don't know if you remember the gals biking there down there in that park. It's you always think about it, but it isn't like a leopard. An African leopard's far more dangerous now.
Fortunately, here in Missouri, they're so few and rare that,
Yeah.
I mean, your chances of seeing one or being threatened by one,
Not very likely.
just not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen.
If you get loose with your habits, especially if this continues to increase, I'd be more worried about black bear. Not that black bear are usually a problem anyway, but I ran into a female one morning in the Smoky Mountains, and I just talked to her. She was off the trail from me, and I decided going up the trail, and I heard this, wah! And I looked over, and there goes the 2 cubs, going up the trail. I thought, oh crap.
Yeah.
Well, but see, I wasn't between her and the cubs. She just looked at me, she didn't turn around, just went on back to her. She was no problem. Now, if that had been a grizzly bear, I might have been in trouble, in blood sugar. And that's a whole different ballgame, won't get into that, but anyway.
Why do you think their numbers have decreased over the years?
Which animal is that?
The mountain lions?
Well, I don't think mountain lion numbers are decreasing.
No.
If you consider the United States as a whole, it's an expanding, growing population.
Give you an example too. Idaho, I don't know if you knew this or not, Idaho is, we were talking about this mountain lion thing in Colorado, and some people are concerned about declining elk, deer, and won't go to the wolves, but in Idaho, they've said that if you're out deer hunting or elk hunting, and you see a mountain lion and you want to take it, you can go ahead and shoot it. You don't have to have a license. And then you're out, you've given up your elk license or your deer license. You trade it. I guess that's another way, you know, because the odds are you probably won't see one anyway. But once in a while, somebody does. And if they decide, well, hey, that'd be a great trophy, you know, I've never had that chance, you know. So that might get a few more mountain lions taken. They're questioning how to try to harvest out west a little bit more of the mountain lion population. It's very strong. It's very strong in Colorado, Idaho.
Yeah, some of those states out west, they have reduced the ways that you can harvest these animals. For example, trapping's been outlawed in some areas, and some areas you can't hunt with dogs, and things like that. So the politicians sometimes make laws that sort of tie the hands of the wildlife managers, biologists, whose job it is to manage these. So, and in some of those states, they've seen a real boom in the population.
California.
Of those, like California. So
Can't hunt them with dogs.
they have such a large area. I mean, that's probably the most successful way is to hunt with dogs. So, anyway, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but nationwide, mountain lion populations are growing.
What is the life expectancy on those three creatures?
Of these three creatures, okay, in the wild, elk, gosh, in good habitat, if they're not hunted, 6, 8, 10 years, did you say, Phil? Something like that. Bears can live longer, up to probably 20 plus years.
20 years.
And a mountain lion, let me look at my notes real quick and I might be able to tell you. Off the top of my head, I don't have it right here, but I would bet 10, 15 years
Yeah, I
probably.
would say the life they lead is dangerous too. They get hurt attacking elk and stuff. They, probably 10, 15 years.
An interesting thing in Missouri, well, if you take some of these other states with the mountain lions, they'll have a few killed on the road every year. So they can figure they know about what their population is in the state, and they get a few killed on the road. In Missouri, since like the mid-90s, we've had 2 killed on the road. We get a lot of reports here in Missouri of people saying they see them, we don't have any sign. Out west, you rarely see them, but they have a lot of sign. So it's kind of, we're just learning a lot about mountain lions in this way. There's a few around. Any more questions?
Why is the mountain lion population increasing? Is it is the food supply better, or is the food
Here's
supply?
the food supply.
Are they
Deer,
protected? You can't shoot them?
mountain lions are protected here in Missouri. Some of the western states do have hunting seasons to try and control the population. Deer are probably the most common food source for mountain lions, and it's estimated that they'll feed on about 1 deer a week. We know we have a lot of deer around Missouri. There's probably deer in those trees right back there tonight.
See them everywhere.
Okay? There's deer everywhere.
Probably in our backyard.
Deer everywhere.
Another interesting one is the, I don't know if you saw in the paper here, I don't remember how long it was, been a few weeks ago, the guy thought he had killed a coyote in Wayne County. He showed the head, showed him holding it up, and they did the DNA test on it and everything. It was a wolf. And I think that was the 4th one. It's always been interesting to me because back when I was teaching in school, I went up to Minnesota to the Wolf Center for a week, the International Wolf Center, my wife and I was always showing videos of the of the wolves in Minnesota. Minnesota's really got them. And I always wondered whether they'd ever get down here or not, and I don't think Iowa and some of that country up there is very attractive to them to cross, but I guess maybe we've gotten a few stragglers down here, I don't know. But it's interesting to me.
Some of these wild animals wander.
They do.
Yeah.
They get pushed out or something, you know. But they estimated now that Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin now have 2,700 wolves. And Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming have about 1,700 out there. I know there's a lot of controversy about wolves, but, you know, we did restock them in Yellowstone. But now to think that there's 3 or 4 back in Missouri, but I don't think you're gonna see many of those. They're wonderful.
The black bears and mountain lions, of course, are protected here in Missouri. There's no hunting season, you're not allowed to hunt them or shoot them. They can be, if you feel your property or livestock or your personal safety is being threatened, you can shoot one to defend yourself or your livestock. You have, within 24 hours, you have to contact the game warden and surrender the carcass to hide. So that's basically the rules on it. No hunting for them.
Are they
If
edible?
you're between,
Are they edible?
are they edible? Oh, yeah.
I mean, deer are.
Bear are. I've eaten bear.
Bear.
Bill's eaten bear, I know.
Have you eaten bear?
Mountain lion,
Yep. Yeah, I don't know whether it's true or not. I had a guy tell me, he said he'd eaten mountain lion. He said it was better than a lot of other things you eat.
It tastes like chicken.
I don't know.
it'd sure be hard to beat it. Elk is delicious.
Elk is really good,
It's really
yeah.
good.
He may like deer, but I'll tell you what, like he said, he's an old elk hunter and gone with him twice. And
Elk Club, is the Elk Club still out there around Jackson? There's an Elk Club out there?
Oh,
Is it
the
still
Elks
out?
Lodge?
Is that still over there?
Yes, that's a fraternal organization that
Oh, you can't come there and eat elk?
if you go over to Peck Ranch, you know, I don't know if any of you like to hike or anything, but you go there, it's a beautiful place to stay. And if you like to hike, you can hike up to Mount Steegle. I've done that a couple of times with some of the people in my club, the Ozark Society. And along the way, I know we were close to elk once, and we might have seen some elk. That is a beautiful hike. When you get up there, you can look south for, I don't know how far, it looks like 40, 50 miles. It's beautiful. Peck Ranch, outside of Winona.
Okay, any other questions? I want to hang around a few minutes, and you're welcome to come up and take a look at these pelts and get an idea what they feel like, how big they are. Yeah.
Were you gonna say anything about armadillos?
Oh, armadillos! Yeah, what do you want to know about armadillos?
Yeah.
How do we keep them out?
That's something
Do
else.
they puncture your car when you drive over them?
I don't know.
You see them along the highway, so they.
Well, there's a reason you see them along the highways. When they're frightened, they don't move very fast, so you catch them on the road, they're frightened, and jump straight up.
Jump straight up. Hit the bar.
So they hit your bumper or the bottom of your vehicle. That's why you see them laying along the roads. But, and I've got some good information in that. But of course, armadillos were common in the southern states, Texas, all across the Gulf Coast of Florida and so forth. And they are, gosh, 10, 15 years, I guess, they've been expanding north. They feed on grubs and worms and things. They dig in the ground. So whenever the ground's not frozen, they can dig in the ground and find something to eat. So all the mild winter we've been having has kind of aided their expansion. They've been found in every county in Missouri. They're all over the place here. You can pass those around. they'll tear up a yard or garden digging for insects to feed on. There's kinds of pests that way. They, kind of interesting, when they breed, they have 4 young every year, and they're twins. They're genetically identical twins. So when they breed, they have 4 at a time, and then quintuplets, I guess you call them. We're going to have them around. You know, are they good for anything? Not heard of, but just I've come across them a number of times out in a while. They just kind of waddle along and scratch and feed. And you can tell by their snout, you know, they dig a little hole and they're digging in the ground. The species we have is called the 9-banded armadillo. They really don't tolerate cold weather. They don't have fur or hair or anything. They just have their body armor, their plates. One interesting thing with armadillos, they have been documented to carry Hansen's disease. If you're not familiar with Hansen's disease, it's also known as leprosy. And it apparently, from what I've read, you can only contract that by eating raw meat from the one that has that disease. So I would just advise, you know, cooking them well done. You'll be safe.
Is there any difference between the male and the female?
Appearance-wise, I don't
Yeah,
think
if
so.
you saw one walking, you could tell one from the other.
They roll up like a ball, don't they?
Yeah, they're not too attractive or anything. But they're coming here on their own. Mother Nature's allowing it done. They have things in common with some of these other animals. They like Missouri.
A friend of mine was get up, he would stay up sometimes at night or else get up early in the morning. He would shoot them. He lived back, oh, he's over in the Ozarks. They had a pretty nice garden they had put in and everything. And boy, he was having trouble.
Would a mountain lion or a bear eat one of these?
Oh, it probably wouldn't be the first choice. You'd have to work on a while to get some flesh in the shell.
Yeah, the shell.
You have to keep in mind, that bears are omnivores. They're primarily plant eaters, really, particularly the black bear.
If a mountain lion came upon one, it would probably, the armadillo would probably kind of curl up in a ball and he'd probably just play with it like a house cat or something.
Possum.
Go on, they go on.
Yeah, that photo shows their claws. I mean, they're really adapted for digging and looking for food, so. When I first saw one on the show of the room years ago, I recognized it because I spent some time in Louisiana in the Army, and we have them down there all over the place. And when I saw one laying beside the road here in Missouri, I thought, oh gosh, some trucker brought that up or something. Now they're just coming on their own.
Every time you turn around, you see one dead on the side of the road.
Yeah, they're pretty common.
You said they don't tolerate cold too well, but what if we have a really rough winter? Would they
Well, if
just
we
die?
continue having rough winters, they can kind of protect themselves for a few days or so at a time. You know, I've seen them go in culverts underground and things like that, so they can find protected areas. I think they'll dig out a little den like in a bank. I've seen them in there, places like that too.